In October 2024, while cataloging Victorian-era photographs for the British Museum's Digital Archive project, photographic historian Dr. Eleanor Mitchell examined an 1889 image from the Whitmore Estate Collection. The photograph showed a young girl, approximately 7 years old, standing in front of a painted backdrop typical of Victorian portrait studios. She wore a white lace dress with ribbons, her light brown hair arranged in careful ringlets. Her expression was melancholy, distant, her eyes seeming to stare past the camera rather than into it. The image had been filed simply as Unidentified Child Portrait, London, 1889, one of over 1,000 photographs Dr. Mitchell had been assigned to digitize and catalog. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard Victorian child portrait. Sad perhaps, but not unusual for an era when subjects rarely smiled for photographs. But when Dr. Mitchell enhanced the image at high resolution and examined the area behind the child's back, she noticed something disturbing partially hidden by the backdrop curtain. 2 adult hands, gripping the child's waist from behind. And then, at even higher magnification, the faint shape of a face barely visible through the dark fabric. Someone was standing behind that curtain. Someone was holding this little girl upright. A detail that would lead Dr. Mitchell down a haunting path into Victorian England's most unsettling mourning tradition and uncover the heartbreaking identity of a child who wasn't standing at all. Dr. Eleanor Mitchell had worked at the British Museum's Department of Prints and Photographs for 14 years. She held a PhD from Oxford University in Victorian visual culture and had built her career specializing in daguerreotypes and early albumen prints. In her time at the museum, she had examined over 8,000 Victorian photographs, authenticating, dating, and cataloging donations from estates, auctions, and private collectors across the United Kingdom. She had written 3 books on Victorian photography techniques and was considered one of Britain's leading experts on 19th-century portraiture. Her department processed approximately 600 historical photographs annually. Most were routine, family portraits, landscapes, documentary images. Occasionally, she encountered something remarkable. A lost image of a famous figure. A photograph that changed historical understanding. But most days, her work was methodical, careful, and quiet. In March 2024, Harold Whitmore died at his home in Yorkshire at the age of 94. Whitmore had been a wealthy antique collector who spent over 60 years acquiring Victorian photographs from estate sales, auctions, and private sellers across England. His collection was legendary among historians, one of the largest private holdings of Victorian photography in the country. His family, having no interest in maintaining the collection, donated it to the British Museum. The donation included 1,247 photographs spanning from 1840 to 1901. Portraits, landscapes, family albums, and what the Victorians called memorial photographs. Dr. Mitchell was assigned to digitize and catalog the entire collection. It was expected to take approximately 8 months. She began in September 2024, working through the photographs methodically, one by one. In October 2024, she reached photograph number 847. The photograph was an albumen print, approximately 4 by 6 inches, mounted on a cardboard backing. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, E.W., December 1889, Hartley & Sons Studio, London. A studio stamp on the lower corner confirmed, Hartley & Sons Portrait Photographers 47, Regent Street, London. Dr. Mitchell examined the front of the image. A young girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, stood before a painted backdrop depicting a pastoral scene. She wore an elaborate white lace dress, the kind typically reserved for special occasions, a communion, perhaps, or a formal family event. White ribbons adorned her carefully arranged hair. In her small hands, she held a bouquet of flowers. But something about the image troubled Dr. Mitchell. The girl's complexion was unusually pale, almost white. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring past the camera into nothing. Her posture was rigid, unnaturally stiff. Her arms hung at her sides in a position that seemed awkward, uncomfortable. No child would stand so perfectly still. Dr. Mitchell had seen thousands of Victorian photographs. She knew the conventions, the poses, the techniques. And she knew, with a growing sense of unease, that something was wrong with this image. She scanned the photograph at 6,400 dpi, the museum's standard for archival digitization. On her computer screen, she examined the high-resolution image carefully. At 400% magnification, she studied the edges of the frame, the details of the backdrop, the folds of the girl's dress. Then she zoomed in on the area behind the child. At 600% magnification, she noticed an irregularity. Behind the girl's midsection, where the dark velvet backdrop curtain hung, there was a shape that didn't belong. She increased magnification to 800%. Two adult hands, clearly visible through a gap in the curtain fabric, gripping the child's waist, holding her upright. Dr. Mitchell's breath caught. She leaned closer to the screen, her heart pounding. She adjusted the contrast, enhanced the shadows. And there, barely visible through the dark fabric of the curtain, she could make out the faint outline of an adult face. Someone had been standing behind that curtain when this photograph was taken. Someone had been holding this child upright because she could not stand on her own. Dr. Mitchell understood immediately what she was looking at. This was a post-mortem photograph. The child in the image was deceased. The hidden figure was holding her body upright for a final portrait. Victorian post-mortem photography was a practice that began in the 1840s and continued until the early 1900s. Before photography became widespread, only wealthy families could afford painted portraits of their loved ones. When photography emerged as an accessible technology, it offered middle-class families something precious, the ability to capture and preserve the image of someone they loved. This was particularly important when that someone died. In Victorian England, death was ever present. Medical care was limited. Diseases that are easily treatable today, scarlet fever, diphtheria, measles, whooping cough, killed thousands every year. In 1889, approximately 150 out of every 1,000 children died before reaching the age of 5. Many families lost multiple children. Death was not hidden away in hospitals as it often is today. People died at home, surrounded by family, and mourning rituals were elaborate and prolonged. Post-mortem photography emerged from this culture of death. When a loved one passed, families would often commission a photographer to take a final portrait. For many, especially children, this was the only photograph ever taken of them. The images became treasure memorials, displayed in homes, kept in lockets, passed down through generations. The photographers developed techniques to make the deceased appear alive or peacefully sleeping. Eyes were sometimes propped open or painted onto the photograph afterward. Bodies were posed sitting in chairs, lying on beds, or even standing upright. For standing poses, photographers used special metal stands, hidden braces that held the body in position. Sometimes, family members themselves held the deceased, their hands hidden from the camera. Dr. Mitchell had examined dozens of post-mortem photographs in her career. She could usually identify them by subtle signs, the pallor of skin, the positioning of hands, the unfocused quality of eyes, the unnatural stillness that no living subject could maintain during the long exposure times required by Victorian cameras. But this photograph was different. In most standing post-mortem portraits, metal stands were used. The hidden figure technique, a person concealed behind a curtain holding the body, was less common. It required someone willing to stand motionless for up to 10 minutes during the exposure. It required a kind of intimacy with death that went beyond professional service. Someone had loved this child enough to hold her one last time. Dr. Mitchell needed to know who this girl was. Who was EW? And who was the figure hidden in the shadows, refusing to let her stand alone? She began her search. Dr. Mitchell first attempted to trace the photograph through Hartley & Sons, the studio that had taken the image. She contacted the London Metropolitan Archives, which held business records from Victorian-era photographers. Hartley & Sons had operated from 1867 to 1912, a well-respected studio known for quality portraiture and, according to historical accounts, sensitive handling of memorial photographs. The archives contained partial records from a studio, including appointment ledgers from certain years. Dr. Mitchell requested the December 1889 ledger. 3 days later, she received the digitized scan. She searched for entries from mid-December 1889. On December 14th, she found it. December 14th, 1889, memorial portrait, Whitmore family, child. Whitmore. The same surname as Harold Whitmore, the collector whose estate had donated this photograph to the museum. This was not a coincidence. This photograph had not been randomly acquired by Harold Whitmore at an auction. It had been in his family. It was his ancestor. Dr. Mitchell immediately contacted the Whitmore family. Harold Whitmore's grandson, Thomas Whitmore, responded within 2 days. He was surprised by the inquiry, but willing to help. He had inherited various family documents from his grandfather, including an old family Bible that contained birth and death records spanning back to the early 1800s. Thomas searched the Bible and found the entry Dr. Mitchell was looking for. Emma Louise Whitmore. Born March 3, 1882. Died December 11, 1889, aged 7 years. Scarlet fever. Our angel taken too soon. E.W. was Emma Whitmore. Dr. Mitchell now had a name. She contacted the General Register Office in London and requested Emma's death certificate. It arrived within a week. The certificate confirmed Emma Louise Whitmore died December 11, 1889. Cause of death, scarlet fever. Age, 7 years. Address, 23 Belmont Gardens, Kensington, London. Father, William Whitmore, textile merchant. Mother, Catherine Whitmore, née Ashford. Dr. Mitchell then contacted St. Mary Abbott's Church in Kensington, the parish church for the Belmont Gardens area. Their burial record showed Emma Louise Whitmore, buried December 16, 1889. Daughter of William and Catherine Whitmore. Much beloved. Service attended by many. The pieces were coming together. But Dr. Mitchell still had one unanswered question. Who was the figure hidden behind the curtain, holding Emma upright? The breakthrough came after 2 weeks of searching. Thomas Whitmore, while searching through boxes of his late grandfather Harold's belongings, discovered something remarkable, a bundle of old letters, carefully preserved in a wooden box. The letters dated from 1889 to 1893 and were correspondence between Catherine Whitmore, Emma's mother, and her sister Margaret, who lived in Edinburgh. Thomas scanned and sent the letters to Dr. Mitchell. The letter, dated December 20th, 1889, 5 days after Emma's burial, contained the answer. Catherine wrote to her sister, "Dearest Margaret, I can scarcely hold the pen for weeping. Our Emma is gone. The fever took her on Wednesday morning, just before dawn. She slipped away in my arms so quietly as if falling asleep. I have not slept since. I cannot close my eyes without seeing her face. We had her portrait made 3 days after she passed. Mr. Hartley was most kind and patient with us. He suggested using his standing apparatus, as is customary for such portraits. But William could not bear it. He could not bear the thought of our darling held up by a metal contraption, cold and impersonal. He insisted on holding her himself, hidden behind the curtain, so she would not seem alone. He held her for nearly 10 minutes while Mr. Hartley made the exposure. His arms must have ached terribly, but his hands never shook. He held her perfectly still. When I asked him afterward why he had done it, he wept, the first tears I had seen him shed since she died. He said he wanted to hold her one last time. He said if the photograph was to be her final portrait, he wanted to be part of it, even if no one could see him. He wanted her to know, somehow, that her father was there, that she was not alone. I have the photograph now. I cannot look at it without weeping. But I am grateful, too. Grateful that William held her. Grateful that in her final portrait, she was held by hands that loved her." Dr. Mitchell sat at her desk, reading the letter for the 3rd time. Her eyes were wet. The hidden figure was William Whitmore, Emma's father. He had held his deceased daughter for 10 minutes, hidden behind a curtain, so that in her final photograph, she would not be alone. A father's last embrace, invisible to anyone who viewed the photograph for 135 years. Until now. Emma Louise Whitmore was born on March 3, 1882, in Kensington, London. Her father, William Whitmore, was a successful textile merchant, aged 29 at the time of her birth. Her mother, Catherine Ashford Whitmore, was 25, the daughter of a solicitor. They had married in 1880 and settled into a comfortable home at 23 Belmont Gardens, a respectable address in one of London's better neighborhoods. Emma was their first child. According to family letters, she was a bright, curious girl who loved books and drawing. She learned to read at age 4 and devoured every book she could find. She had a beloved porcelain doll named Rosie, a gift from her grandmother, which she carried everywhere. Her father called her "My Little Star." In 1884, Emma's brother Frederick was born. In 1887, her sister Alice followed. Emma adored her younger siblings. Letters describe her reading stories to Frederick, helping care for baby Alice, playing the role of little mother with patience and tenderness unusual for a child her age. The Whitmore family attended church every Sunday at St. Mary Abbott's. They took holidays at the seaside in Brighton. William's textile business prospered, and the family wanted for nothing. By all accounts, Emma had a happy childhood, privileged, comfortable, surrounded by love. Then came the winter of 1889. In late November, a scarlet fever outbreak swept through London. The disease, caused by bacterial infection, was deadly in the Victorian-era. It began with fever, sore throat, and a distinctive red rash. For many children, it progressed to complications, rheumatic fever, kidney failure, death. On December 2, 1889, Emma developed a fever and complained of a sore throat. Catherine, alarmed, called for the family physician, Dr. Thomas Grantham. He examined Emma and hoped it was merely a cold. By December 4th, the telltale rash appeared. Dr. Grantham delivered the dreaded diagnosis, scarlet fever. Emma was confined to her bedroom. Frederick and Alice were sent to stay with relatives to prevent the disease from spreading. Catherine moved a cot into Emma's room and stayed by her side day and night, bathing her forehead with cool cloths, trying to get her to drink water, reading to her when she was awake. William came home from work each evening and sat beside Emma's bed, holding her hand, telling her stories about the adventures they would have when she was well. They would go to Brighton, he promised. They would build sandcastles. She would feel the sun on her face. Emma smiled weakly. "Yes, Papa. Sandcastles." But Emma did not improve. On December 10th, she became delirious with fever. She called out for Rosie, her doll, and Catherine placed it in her arms. She called out for her mother, and Catherine held her close. On December 11th, 1889, at 3:40 in the morning, Emma Louise Whitmore died in her mother's arms. She was 7 years, 9 months, and 8 days old. Catherine's letter to her sister, written years later, described that moment. She took one small breath, and then no more. I held her for an hour after, unable to let go. When the dawn light came through the window, I looked at her face and thought how peaceful she seemed. As if she were only sleeping. As if she might wake at any moment and ask for breakfast. But she would not wake. My little girl would not wake. William, according to family accounts, could not speak for 2 days. He sat in his study, staring at nothing. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red but dry. He began making arrangements. Victorian mourning customs were elaborate and strictly observed. The house was draped in black crepe. Mirrors were covered. The family wore black mourning clothes. Catherine would wear black for 2 full years, as was customary for a mother who had lost a child. Letters were written on black-bordered stationery. A memorial wreath was placed on the front door. 3 days after Emma's death, on December 14th, William and Catherine brought her to Hartley & Sons studio for her memorial portrait. The session lasted nearly 30 minutes. Mr. Hartley was patient and compassionate, experienced in the delicate work of photographing the deceased. He offered to use his metal standing apparatus to hold Emma upright, as was standard practice. William refused. "I will hold her," he said. "She is my daughter. I will hold her." He positioned himself behind the backdrop curtain, finding a gap through which he could reach Emma without being visible to the camera. Catherine dressed Emma in her finest white lace dress, arranged her hair in the ringlets she had loved, placed flowers in her small hands. And then William held her. For 10 minutes, as Mr. Hartley prepared and exposed the photographic plate, William Whitmore stood behind that curtain, his arms wrapped around his daughter's small body, holding her upright. His hands gripped her waist. His face was inches from the back of her head. He held her perfectly still, so still that the long exposure would capture her image without blur. Catherine watched from across the studio, weeping silently. When it was over, when Mr. Hartley indicated the exposure was complete, William did not immediately let go. He stood there for another moment, his face pressed against Emma's hair, his arms still around her. "My little star," he whispered. "My little star." 2 days later, Emma was buried at Brompton Cemetery. William commissioned a marble headstone with the inscription, "Emma Louise Whitmore, our little star, forever shining." The family eventually resumed their lives, as families must. Catherine gave birth to two more children, George in 1891 and Margaret in 1893. Frederick and Alice grew up, married, had children of their own. William's business continued to prosper. But they never forgot Emma. Catherine kept Emma's doll, Rosie, for the rest of her life. She kept it in her bedroom, on a shelf where she could see it every day. In a letter to her sister written in 1902, she confessed, "I cannot part with Rosie. Emma loved her so. I hold her sometimes and remember my girl. I know it is foolish. I know Emma is with God. But holding that doll makes me feel close to her still." The memorial photograph hung in the family home until William's death in 1921 at age 67. Catherine followed him in 1924, also at age 67. Both were buried beside Emma at Brompton Cemetery, together again with the daughter they had lost 35 years before. The photograph passed to Frederick, Emma's younger brother. Then to Frederick's son Harold, born in 1912. Harold became an antique collector, surrounding himself with artifacts from the Victorian era. Perhaps it was his way of staying connected to a past that included an aunt he never met, but whose photograph hung in his grandparents' home throughout his childhood. Harold kept the photograph his entire life, but as decades passed, the story behind it faded. By the time he died in 2024 at age 94, he knew only that it was an old family photograph. He did not know the girl's name was Emma. He did not know her father had held her from behind the curtain. He did not know the secret hidden in the shadows for 135 years. He did not know her father had held her from behind the curtain. He did not know the secret hidden in the shadows for 135 years. Until Dr. Eleanor Mitchell looked closer. Dr. Mitchell had been in contact with Thomas Whitmore, Harold's grandson, throughout her research. Now she had the complete story. She asked if she could meet with him in person to share everything she had discovered. On November 2, 2024, Dr. Mitchell traveled to Surrey, England, to the home of Thomas Whitmore. Thomas, age 58, welcomed her warmly. His daughter, also named Emma, a family name passed down through generations, was present as well. She was 28 years old, a schoolteacher, curious about the family history that had suddenly become fascinating. They sat in Thomas's living room. Dr. Mitchell had brought her laptop with the enhanced photograph and printed copies of Catherine's letters. "Mr. Whitmore," she began gently, "this photograph shows your great-great-aunt, Emma Louise Whitmore. She died of scarlet fever in December 1889 at the age of 7. Thomas studied the photograph on a laptop screen. "I knew we had Victorian relatives who died young. My grandfather Harold mentioned it once or twice, but I never knew the details." "There's more," Dr. Mitchell said. "When we enhanced the image at high magnification, we discovered something that had been hidden for 135 years. She zoomed in on the area behind Emma's waist. "Do you see that? Those are hands. Adult hands, gripping Emma's waist through a gap in the backdrop curtain. And here," she enhanced another section. "You can just make out the shape of a face behind the fabric." Thomas leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "My God, someone is standing behind her." Yes, someone was holding her upright. "This is a post-mortem photograph, Mr. Whitmore. Emma had been dead for 3 days when this image was taken, and based on letters written by your great-great-grandmother Catherine." Dr. Mitchell handed him the printed letter. The person holding Emma was her father, your great-great-grandfather William Whitmore. Thomas read the letter in silence. His daughter Emma read over his shoulder. When he finished, he set the paper down slowly. "He held her for 10 minutes, Thomas said quietly. "His dead child. He stood behind that curtain and held her so she wouldn't be alone in the photograph. Yes, his hands must have ached terribly. 10 minutes without moving. According to Catherine's letter, his hands never shook. He held her perfectly still." Thomas looked at the photograph again. "I never knew any of this. I knew the photograph existed. I remember seeing it in my grandfather's collection. But I thought it was just a sad old picture. I had no idea." His voice trailed off. Young Emma wiped tears from her eyes. "She was my age," she said softly. "Well, I'm older now, but when she died, she was just a little girl." "She was loved," Dr. Mitchell said. "This photograph proves that more than any document or letter ever could. Her father loved her so much that even after death, he could not let her stand alone." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he stood. "There's something I should show you. Wait here." He left the room and returned a few minutes later, carrying an old wooden box. He set it on the coffee table and carefully lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in yellow tissue paper, was a porcelain doll. Dr. Mitchell's breath caught. "This was passed down through the family," Thomas said. "My grandfather Harold kept it. He told me it was important, but didn't remember why. I've had it for 20 years since he gave it to me, and I never knew the story." Dr. Mitchell looked at the doll, its painted face faded but still visible, its dress yellowed with age, its tiny porcelain hands folded delicately. "Rosie," she said. Thomas looked at her. "What?" "Her name is Rosie. Emma's doll. According to the letters, Emma carried this doll everywhere. Catherine kept it after Emma died. She couldn't bear to part with it." Thomas stared at the doll in his hands. "This is Emma's doll, from 1889. 135 years old, and it's been in your family the entire time." Young Emma reached out tentatively. "May I hold her?" Thomas handed her the doll. The young woman, named Emma, holding a doll that had belonged to another Emma 135 years ago, cradled it gently. "I was named Emma," she said, "but I never knew why. My parents said it was just a family name. They didn't know the story either." "The name survived," Dr. Mitchell said. "Whether anyone remembered consciously or not, your great-great-great-aunt's name lived on. And now you know why." Young Emma looked at the photograph of a girl, then at the doll in her arms. She loved this doll, and her father loved her so much he held her one last time, even after she was gone. "Yes," Dr. Mitchell said. "That's exactly what the photograph shows. Not a sad girl standing alone. A beloved child held by her father. Hidden but there. Always there." In December 2024, the British Museum added Emma Whitmore's photograph to its permanent collection. The enhanced image, showing the hidden hands and face of William Whitmore, became part of a special exhibition titled Lives Remembered, Victorian Memorial Portraits. The placard beside the photograph reads, "Emma Louise Whitmore, 1882 to 1889. This memorial portrait, taken 3 days after Emma's death from scarlet fever, shows her father William hidden behind the curtain, holding his daughter upright for her final portrait. His hands, visible upon close examination, represent a father's love that transcended even death. For 135 years, William remained hidden in this photograph, his presence unknown. Now at last his final act of love has been revealed." Beside the photograph, in a glass display case, sits Rosie, Emma's beloved doll. Thomas Whitmore donated it to the museum so it could remain with Emma's image forever. The doll's placard reads, "Rosie, Emma's beloved doll since age 3. After Emma's death, her mother Catherine kept Rosie for the rest of her life, unable to part with this connection to her daughter. The doll remained in the Whitmore family for 135 years, a silent witness to a grief that never fully faded and a love that never died." Today, the Whitmore family numbers over 40 people, descendants of William and Catherine, who lost their first child to scarlet fever in 1889. Frederick's line continued. George and Margaret had children of their own. Generations passed. Wars came and went. The world transformed beyond anything the Victorians could have imagined. But in a photograph, in a doll, in a name passed down through generations, Emma Louise Whitmore endures. In December 2024, Thomas Whitmore held a family gathering at his home. Children, grandchildren, great-nieces, and nephews filled the house with noise and laughter. On the wall hung a framed copy of Emma's photograph, now restored and enhanced, William's hidden hands clearly visible. Thomas's granddaughter, Lily, age 6, almost exactly the same age Emma had been, stood before the photograph, studying it with the earnest curiosity of childhood. "Great-grandpa," she said, tugging Thomas's sleeve. "Who is that little girl?" Thomas knelt beside her, so they were eye to eye. "That's Emma. She was your great-great-great-great-aunt. She died a very long time ago, when she was just a little bit older than you." Lily studied the image. She looked sad. She was very sick. But her daddy loved her so much that he held her for this photograph, so she wouldn't be alone. "See, if you look very carefully, you can see his hands right there." He pointed to the enhanced area of the image. Lily peered at the photograph, then nodded. "I see them. He's hugging her." "Yes, sweetheart. He's hugging her." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this with the simple clarity of a child. "That's nice," she finally said. "My daddy hugs me too." Thomas smiled, his eyes glistening. "Yes, Lily. That's what fathers do. They hold their children. And sometimes if they love them enough, they never really let go." For 135 years, this photograph kept a secret. A father's hands, hidden in the shadows, holding his daughter one last time. Victorian England had thousands of such photographs, images of loss, of grief, of desperate attempts to preserve those we love beyond death. Most have been forgotten, their subjects unnamed, their stories lost. But Emma Whitmore is no longer forgotten. She was not just an unidentified girl in a Victorian portrait. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's little star. She loved books and drawing. She carried a doll named Rosie. She read stories to her younger brother and helped care for her baby sister. She dreamed of building sandcastles at the seaside. And when she died, too young, too soon, her father loved her so fiercely that he could not let her face the camera alone. He hid himself behind a curtain and held her for 10 minutes, his arms wrapped around her small body, his face pressed close to her hair. He held her perfectly still, so the photograph would be perfect. So her final portrait would show not a dead child propped up by metal, but a beloved daughter, held by hands that loved her. The photograph that looked like a sad girl, standing alone, was never that at all. It was a portrait of a father's love, hands reaching through time, holding his child forever.